Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
They don't need to turn in their numbers, right? That's my understanding. But you mentioned there's 1 million abortions a year in this country.
Just under 1 billion. Yeah,
just under a million.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, what for me, I take a little bit of a different approach on this, a little bit more of a pragmatic approach, because I think, we get so caught up in our right versus left political stances, right? That my big frustration is there's a lot of us in the middle who are like, hey, we can have a conversation about this without hating each other.
Totally.
Right?
Yep.
And let's talk about, you just talked about social justice, which I think that pits the left against the right? Let's talk about abortion, which definitely pits the left against the right?
Yeah.
And so the way that I look at this is saying, listen, I think most of us can agree, right, that abortion is not something we should go and party about, right? Let's not celebrate it. Like, you are performing a medical procedure that costs money, right, that has been shown to have negative psychological outcomes, and to some, including myself, I'll put myself in this camp, kill a human being, right? So whether you think it's bad financially for women who tend to be poor, right, or more, lean, more poor, or have psychological conditions, or kill a human being, let's all agree that abortion is probably not a great thing, right? And so why don't we take an approach of saying, one, how do we reduce unplanned pregnancies, right? That, for me, is where the evangelical group has come against me specifically, because I think the best way to do that is put women who have a high risk of an abortion on birth control. And so the evangelicals are telling me, like, hey, that is bad because you are now telling them that sex outside of marriage is okay, right? And I'm saying, no, they're coming to us because they're having sex, right? And so how do we reduce the risks of that abortion, killing the human being? If you really think a human being is going to be killed, let's keep a human being from getting killed. Let's put them on contraception, and then lead them back to a more biblical view of sex, right? I haven't seen anybody take a biblical view of sex who doesn't believe as Jesus is their savior. I mean, you don't start with, hey, I'm not going to have sex outside of marriage, and then get to a place of saying, I believe that Jesus is my savior. You start with believe that Jesus is my savior, then you come back and say, oh, you know what? Maybe sex within the marital context is the best way of having it, right? And so it's like, let's care for them where they are. If hopefully they'll accept Jesus, because that's what we want, right? And they'll then move back to a more biblical view of sex. That, to me, is the best way of doing this.
That makes all kinds of sense. And there's the pushback on that, this sort of idealistic view where, no, we don't want you to abort your baby, and we don't want you to be having sex outside of marriage, and we're just not willing to, quote unquote, compromise and give you a safe way to have sex outside of marriage. Exactly. In the meantime, while we still work on kind of changing your heart and giving you some information and ideas why that might be a bad thing to be doing for your sake, and so forth. And there's just sort of this, almost, I just pictured kind of like this idealistic view that we don't want you to have an abortion. We also don't want you to have sex outside of marriage. And so we're just not willing to have contraception kind of be part of the discussion. Is that kind of the thinking there?
Right.
Okay.
Which we think
that's kind of dangerous, because it's like, this is what we want, but is it really plausible? You know what I mean? Is that kind of viewpoint, is that really workable in society, I guess? I'm coming back around. I agree with your viewpoint.
Is
the idea that we can just get people to stop having sex?
Yeah, it's not. That's not like
that's not. It's great. You can have this idea, you can have this ideal, but it's really not that plausible, right? I mean,
it's not. It's not plausible.
Yep.
Unless you believe in Jesus, you're not going to go to a biblical view of sex. It's just not going to happen.
Yep.
Right. And so to try to reverse those is really impossible from my perspective. So then the other pushback is they think that when egg meets sperm, that is conception, right? That is a human being. And so the argument then is these contraceptives are impacting that egg meets sperm, right? So a fertilized egg, where we've gone through 300 studies. The one that everybody points at is that being the case is from 1964, right? So all the new studies show that the drugs are so good now that egg and sperm meet very, very, very rarely. I mean, you have a higher likelihood of dying in a car accident this year than egg meeting sperm and it being aborted with with this drug.
Really?
Right?
And by this drug, do you mean birth control?
Birth control. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Interesting. Now, let's say sperm does meet eggs successfully. Like, people have a lot of different opinions on this, right? If, like, the day after, is that a human being or not? Like, some would say no, and some would say yes, though, right?
Yeah, and I would say yes.
Oh, you would?
Yeah,
okay.
I would. And from my perspective, that's a human being. And so we should try to protect that human being at all costs. And so what the evangelical writer is saying is, okay, well, if you think that's a human being, then and we need to protect that human being, and you have a drug that has a very small chance of aborting that human being, then you shouldn't use the drug.
Okay.
Right? And I'm saying that we take risks every single day. I'm sitting here with you, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we are 4 feet from each other, right? And so there is a possibility that you have COVID, now I have COVID, and there's a possibility that I die from COVID because I'm having this conversation with you. There's a chance that I drove here. There's a chance that when I drive home that I die in a car accident.
Yes.
Right? We make decisions every single day that put us at risk, but we make decisions for our best outcome, right? And so my argument is that there is a massively small, maybe 1 in 10,000 chance that fertilized egg gets destroyed. And they're saying, well, it's a 1 in 10,000. Here's the other stat that people don't want to talk about. In the first 4 weeks after of gestation, meaning the first 4 weeks after fertilized egg, if you have wine 2 or 3 times a week, it is 10x more likely to create a miscarriage than that drug. 10x. And so if you're going to be against a birth control pill, right, then you should be also against anybody in their reproductive years having wine.
Wow, that's something.
Right? And so there's this sacred cow
right,
that we just can't get around that I'm saying could be the end of abortion. If we could just get these women on contraceptives, we could end abortion the way that we're seeing it now, right? Yep. And so why? I mean, the people from the right who think I hate abortion and the people on the left who say I hate unplanned pregnancies, man, can't we all get together and say we should get these women on contraceptives?
Yeah.
From 1980 to today, abortion has been cut by half. From 1980 to today, there's massively more women on contraceptives, and the contraceptives are significantly more effective than they were back in 1980. And so there is a perfect correlation between contraception and abortion. And so for me, I take a pragmatic approach that says, if we want to reduce abortions, let's get women on contraceptives. And by the way, believers, it gives you an opportunity to engage them.
Right. Yeah.
Right? You're not yelling at them on a street corner. You're engaging them. Let's engage them. That's what we're called to do. And let's do the merciful thing, which is to keep them from having an abortion.
Yes.
That to me feels Christ-like.